Coming on here to share a few perspectives that have come up as I've been speaking to likely many of you watching this video of the topics of spiritual, physical, mental, emotional well-being. How do we heal? How do we come to a place of our own inner freedom and inner power? And the topic today that I was speaking to a friend about was the topic of how do we reclaim our power, specifically in relation to our well-being, our sense of health, our sense of wellness, and how do we move from a place of dis-ease or fear to a place of returning to our natural state of love and well-being and abundance and a sense of inner freedom. And I'm not speaking of any woo-woo idea about this. I'm speaking of it in a very practical way, which is really just coming down to how do we experience our day? How do we experience our moment-to-moment life? How do we experience ourselves and our perception of the world and relationships and is our mental body, physical body, emotional body, spiritual, energetic body, are these feeling well? Do they feel balanced? Do they feel aligned? This is a question we each have to ask ourselves. And in a time where the fears are running rampant, whether that's the fear of apocalypse or someone winning or losing an election, or whether we can catch or die or get sick from some disease or some virus. These are all rampant fears kind of running around, and I wanted to really come and just share a few perspectives on this to help clear things up a little bit to the best of my ability, without really needing to or try to convince you of anything, because it's really going to be up to each of us to decide where we'd like to place our attention and what perspectives do we feel to be most empowering or most aligned to a journey of experiencing a sense of well-being, peace, contentment, a sense of blissfulness for the majority of our day. Because I know in my own journey, I came from quite a lot of pain, quite a lot of suffering on all levels of my anatomy, all levels of my human experience. And, I could say that I feel quite content, these days. I mean, I'm not some rich person in wealth. I'm not, a huge status figure. I don't have millions of friends or followers or all these typical ideas of what we may attribute to what it means to feel well or feel content or feel good with ourselves. But I can speak from this place. And so, when it comes to well-being, all that I've learned on my journey is really that we have to be willing to take power back from things that we have potentially given it away to, like the idea that wellness cannot come easy, or that others are the determining factor whether we'll be well or not, or genetics are the determining element to whether I should have or not have a disease or an issue with my well-being or my perspectives or my emotions or the way I can navigate life. Or maybe a virus, whether I'm in a fear state of whether a virus can attack and kill me and bring the impending end to my experience here. These are all kind of things that we generally have given our power away to. And this has been a product of our education. It's been a product of, our conditioning, our traumas. It's been a product of, our own delusion, our lack of awareness to the realities that we really do have the power to navigate our well-being, navigate our life in a way that can be quite painless, not pain-free, because we're susceptible to that in a human life, but certainly filled with far less pain than maybe what we've come to know, and far less suffering than what we think is and have deemed as normal. Because it's been common that a lot of the things that we face day in and day out that we certainly do not need to tolerate or do not need to give our power up to, we've tolerated and we thought is normal, because 1 in 2 people are depressed, or 1 in 3 people are getting cancer or heart disease or all of these things. And we could say that a far bigger ratio of people who disconnected from the source of themselves, a sense of their true nature. We can call it God or consciousness or the absolute source of all. A disconnection from where life really comes from and how life comes and how life manifests. And so with all of these things being the norm, we can seem quite crazy if we go against that or go against the grain or hold different perspectives than what someone may view to be normal. And in the topic of disease and viruses, these are the most rampant of perspectives, mainly because these perspectives are certainly free perspectives. And they're not going to drain the bank to some pharmaceutical company or to some, healer or doctor that needs all of this, these investments for you to become well. That's the one core thing. And then on top of that, the core fear of just being ridiculed and not trusting in oneself that we really do have the power to live a healthy and free life in a place of a deep sense of well-being. So when we look at the topic of disease, for instance, I've shared this quote often, and that quote is from Arnold Ehret, which is a famous fasting and healing based doctor who shared a very simple perspective that all disease is constipation. What do we mean by this? Well, we mean that if our body is filled with toxicity on the physical level, on the mental level, on the emotional level, on the energetic level, we're naturally going to have dis-ease in our body. We're going to feel that. We feel that when we don't express an emotion. We feel that when we eat something not so great or eat for an extended period of time not so great, and we start to feel it in the body. We feel that when we hold beliefs and perspectives that are not aligned for our greater good, and we start to feel the clenching in the head, the headaches, the draining, the overall kind of depressive states. This is not really a far off concept. It's very simple. But we kind of just get distracted by all of the other promises and ideas and education and kind of indoctrination that disease is coming from all these other places that we need to be wary of and afraid of and or we don't have control of. Like if a disease is because of our genetics, then we don't have control over it and we cannot affect it or change it in any way. And while this is partly the case, we are going to be affected by our genetics, we still do have a very high amount of control in our ability to heal. And healing is not just on the physical level. There's many layers to our multidimensional anatomy that has been shared for thousands of years, much longer really, in our human history of cultures who have known this and had a deep awareness as to the energetic and spiritual realms of our experience of healing. And then when it comes to a virus, I've been studying the topic of fasting and disease for a long time, but I didn't consider the reversed process of our understanding of viruses to be quite, to be on the same principles. But it made so much sense when I started to understand and research that, the ideas of viruses are really just the same thing. It's a much more complex, and not really, but it can be a more complex topic, especially because of all the running rampant, ideas and beliefs and opinions about the topic are. But when we really get into it, we see that viruses are also another product of toxicity. It's another product of our bodies being injected or being, having consumed or brought in a lot of different forms of toxicity and toxic energy and toxic substances that manifest as, what we call viruses, or what we call the body's process of releasing toxicity and releasing these viruses or so-called viruses, which is really just a process of releasing toxicity from its own self, and then it being it looking like a virus or being labeled as that. And there are viruses, of course, and other forms of bacteria. But I watched a beautiful video that I shared recently. You can go on my stories or send me a message of it by someone far more educated than me in this topic that simply reiterated, my perspectives of what I've also come to in regards to healing through fasting and healing disease and healing all the plethora of ailments, mental, physical, emotional, that I've had for years and years and years, and coming to a place of well-being that really, opened up my awareness to the reality that I had been deluded, and I had deluded myself, and I had given my power away to things that I really didn't need to. And, this goes far beyond just the topic of physical healing and just being well, the typical ideas of wellness. This goes into the perspective of our spiritual understanding of ourselves, this planet, our human history, the universe, coming into a much more grounded awareness as to who we are as a human, who we are as a spiritual being, and what does it mean to live in our power. Not again some new age idea of living in our power and the traditional means that come to it. There is validity in that, but sometimes that gets overhyped or ungrounded. It's coming into a very practical viewpoint of this, of what does it mean to be in our power, and what does it mean to live in this way. And so I feel the core, at least intention of this video is to simply remind us that we do have the power to navigate our reality in a way that we desire. Understanding that if we desire to heal, we can. If we desire to realize or awaken to our true nature, we can. If we desire to align with nature, because that's really what it's about. That's what I was sharing with my friend today, it really is just about aligning with nature, which is very simple. It's not distracted. It doesn't need force to have things happen. And it just is the way it is, and it happens the way it happens, and it happens in a really beautiful way. That's why we're so unraveled in nature every time we go into a forest or go to a beautiful piece of scenery or just go and sit by a tree. Much of our problems, much of our issues, much of our lack of understanding kind of just gets dissolved. And so, we've been indoctrinated into a lot of synthetic, unnatural ways of living and unnatural ways of being, from the food we eat to the things we watch to the ways we interact and to the things that we look to create, or what we call our job and our work and what we call our journey of purpose and service. Many of these things have been co-opted into very synthetic ways of being and doing. And so it's important for us to just remind ourselves of this. And as we do that, we'll come across videos like this and videos like the one I just talked about, and resources and people and situations that further an opportunity for us to deepen into ourselves and to deepen into a clearer knowing of ourselves and who we are. So, I hope this video just at least ignited something. I didn't get into too much substance, at least into the specifics of how we can heal and how we can go through it. I mean, that's much of the work in which I do, and I share it all over my Instagram as much as I can, or on YouTube, and now getting back on Facebook after, my previous disabling. But so you guys can go and check all that out. Same with ayp.life is a great resource and tool to, get into some of these topics across the board, from healing on a spiritual level to more physical, to our relationships, to how we engage in our work and our creative expression. Because we have to look at it like a full wheel. There's nothing that can be left out. And so I think I'll leave it there. Deep love to each of you. And blessings in this time.